And now the biggest story. The Kharg Island has been attacked by the Americans and the Israelis. It handles Iran crude oil export, making it one of the most critical infrastructure. The attack on it can impact global prices immediately. This attack came in the wake of Iran's attack on Al Jubail facility, which accounts for 12 to 17% of the Saudi Arabia's GDP. It is spread over 1,000 square kilometers and houses 150 industrial units. Iranian authorities significantly damaged the Saudi petrochemical facility. The violence has escalated and now threat looms over civilian infrastructure. What is clear is that Trump is going up the escalation ladder. Trump, in a social media truth, said that the whole civilization will die tonight and never to be brought back again. He said that the years of extortion will end. He said something revolutionary can happen. He said that the God bless the great people of Iran. I mean to say, which American president has ever written that the whole civilization will die tonight? And that's what the American president has put out on social media. America has threatened to hit power plants, trains and bridges. They have already started to destroy bridges inside Iran. And if these are hit, US and Israel would cross a line. US President Donald Trump has warned that Iran's entire infrastructure, its power plants, its bridges could be wiped out in a single day. He has set a deadline, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday, saying no more extension would be given to them, which is 8 p.m. Eastern Time Tuesday, and India time it is morning Wednesday. Let's listen in to Trump.
Operation Epic Fury, where we're doing unbelievably well, well at a level that nobody's ever seen before. The entire country can be taken out in one night, and that night might be tomorrow night. We're giving them till tomorrow, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, and after that, they're going to have no bridges, they're going to have no power plants. We have a plan, because of the power of our military, where every bridge in Iran will be decimated by 12 o'clock tomorrow night, where every power plant in Iran will be out of business, burning, exploding, and never to be used again. I mean, complete demolition by 12 o'clock. And it'll happen over a period of 4 hours if we wanted to.
When asked about whether he's concerned about committing war crimes, Trump replied, not at all. But Tehran is not backing down. Iran is now calling on its own people to step in as human chains. Young citizens are being urged to form chains around power plants, standing guard over critical infrastructure. The advisory is seen as a precursor to possible strikes on civilian-linked infrastructure. Under international humanitarian law, the civilian infrastructure is protected. Article 52 of the additional protocol to the Geneva Conventions defines civilian infra as anything that is not legitimate military objective. This means, unless destroying a target offers a clear and direct military advantage, it cannot be lawfully attacked. At the core of this framework is the principle of distinction, a fundamental rule that requires all parties to clearly differentiate between civilian and combatants. Customary international law reinforces this, stating that civilian objects must not be targeted unless and until they are being used for military purposes. Attackers must avoid civilian targets, while defending forces must not place military assets within civilian areas. The statute of the International Criminal Code goes even further. It explicitly defines it as a war crime to intentionally target civilian objects that are not part of the military objectives, and even in cases where civilian infrastructure is deemed to have military use, or any strike must still pass the test of proportionality, meaning that anticipated military gain must outweigh the potential harm to the civilians. On top of it, as I said, Kharg has been attacked. Now, let me introduce my guests. I'm joined by Ambassador Veena Sikri, Major General Sudhakar Ji, Air Vice Marshal P.K. Srivastava and Professor Swaran Singh. But let me straight away go to Ambassador Veena Sikri. Madam, which president of a country with huge nuclear arsenal says the civilization would be destroyed tonight? Madam, please unmute yourself. Yes.
It's completely. Can you hear me? I'm unmuted. I don't know what's happening there. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm saying is that such a statement by a president is completely unprecedented. I don't think any statement has been made like this, threatening complete destruction of civilization. In fact, it makes you think that President Trump has an idea of using a tactical nuclear missile. Because if you're talking about destroying a civilization overnight, how would you do that except by this massive? So, which is a very, very scary and dangerous and again an unprecedented situation. And we know that the WHO has already been making preparations, planning the eventuality if a nuclear missile is used. But we have also seen a retaliatory threat from Iran itself, and they have listed 8 bridges in the Gulf areas where they will attack. So it's a completely mad situation, mutually assured destruction, as it were, where both sides are threatening this. I really wish that the UN were in any state of health, good health, that they could do anything in this situation, but clearly not. They have not even made any sensible statements in all these weeks that this carnage.
Okay, let's go bit by bit. General Sudhakar ji, decoded. Is it about tactical nuclear weapon that Trump is referring to? Or is it about destruction of the salination plants, power plants, bridges, and civilian infrastructure on which a normal life thrives? Or is he thinking of taking over the Kharg Island? Because even in the attack that took place, the oil depots were not attacked. The military installations within the Kharg Island was taken out.
Good evening, Kartikeya. Thank you for inviting me for your show, and my very warm greetings to distinguished co-panelists. Without meaning to draw any parallel, if I put my feet in his shoes, okay, having gone berserk, no respect for rule of law or anything, and also I'm sure he's mindful of the fact that all these are war crimes that you have listed out. If he means business, then I will, as a military man, focus on Kharg Island. Kharg Island is going to give me the ultimate objective that I am looking for. It will contribute towards arresting the unprecedented pattern which is formed to challenge the weakening of the dollar. It will also help me to prevent de-dollarization, which is speeding up against all my wishes. So therefore, Kharg Island will be when you select a target like this by expeditionary forces, one has to remain bound by as far as possible as per the military aims and objectives. First, foremost thing, guiding principle is that the necessity has to be established. Number 2, there is a principle of proportionality. That is, use of force should not be out of proportion. Number 3, it should not kill the civilian, that is, the targets which are not participating in the war. And number 4, most important thing is that it should be minimum force, minimum time, and maximum outcome. Now, if he's following all these guidelines well, hats off to him, and we give 21 gun salutes and wish him all the best. But I don't think it is going to pan out in this manner. This, in my opinion, this is all a technique of, mutt and Jeff. He's trying out all pressure technique and expecting Iran to yield under pressure. And in my opinion, Iran is the last country that it is going to give in so easily. It is a civilizational power. It is fighting with the back to the wall. And therefore, the musician that you showed, I think I met him. He's a very eminent musician in Iran.
We'll come to that later. So we'll come to that. We'll come to that later. That is another part of the story where the Iranian minister has appealed to the youth to go and surround the civilian infrastructure, stay put there, surround them. That's another layer of, I would say, deterrence. I will not use the word Gandhinian here, but that's another way of organizing a deterrence. Opening comments for Air Vice Marshal P.K. Srivastava. Sir.
So actually what Iran's options in the current situation are very, very limited. And the way President Trump is writing on his post and the words which are coming out, absolutely outrageous. they don't indicate towards anything which may be called the peace deal or the Nobel Peace Prize winner kind of syndrome, which you always wanted to say. He also said that if had I been the president, there wouldn't have been Ukraine and Russia war. Such a person is now talking of annihilating the whole civilization. That's absolutely outrageous by any standards. And the words are absolutely, I would say, very, very crude. But coming to the fact in military terms, Kharg is the economic lifeline of Iran. And fortunately, so far, he has attacked only the military targets and the storage tanks, which are 41 in this thing. It has a lot of oil stored over there. If he attacks that, there can be a pollution of this level which he will not be able to do anything about, and the whole area will get engulfed in that. Coming to, you suspected that he might use the tactical nuclear weapon. That would be catastrophe of the order which we have not seen in this generation or in the previous generation. It is something like a reminder of World War II, and this time the tactical would be much bigger, much stronger. But in my opinion, he has many other options. He doesn't have to really hit power plants and bridges, because that's by no standard of Geneva Convention you mentioned, and General also mentioned, they are war crimes. Nobody can dissuade himself by saying they are not war crimes. Things have started rolling out, but what I think, probably these are the preparations for ground offensive. Because if you really want to capture for any specific purpose or specific time, Kharg Island, you need to do suppression of certain things. The military assets which are there, the firepower which can come from the mainland, because it's not very far from the mainland, it's a small thing, and the kind of missiles they may have, all firepower has to be suppressed if you want to go there, because there's no beachhead of that kind. It's a kind of, where a lot of large containers come. So it's the whole thing ends up on a very a deep sea kind of thing. So it needs some assets to come over there, and they'll be exposed to a lot of firepower of Iranians. So maybe it is one of those exercises, but at the moment, the way they have attacked, I don't think it is still the fear syndrome which they're trying to put in Iranians.
Okay, wonderful, sir. At a very opportune time, let's play these visuals full. Professor Swaran Singh, this is what is happening in Iran right now. When Trump is threatening people that civilization will die tonight, the Iranian people are outside and they are making a human chain. They are making a human chain.
Absolutely.
They are making a human chain for the world to see that if any of the infrastructure is attacked, people are willing to die for it.
Karthikeya, there is a precedent, if you remember, 8 years of war that Iran fought soon after the revolution with Iraq. The same strategy of human chain was also used at that time. So Iran is likely to successfully use that strategy again. But let me quickly decode President Trump's social truth and commentaries otherwise very quickly from letter, spirit, and facts. If you follow the letter as they are, it is not tactical nuclear weapon that President Trump will need to obliterate Iranian civilization. It has to be mega tonnage of uncontrolled, absolute nuclear war to decimate Iran as a civilization. If you remember, the only time we know nuclear or atomic weapons were used, they were used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Right now, they are one of the most livable cities on planet Earth. So a tactical nuclear weapon is not going to deliver anything at all. Maybe temporarily it will create certain chaos. In terms of spirit of President Trump's commentaries, it's very clear that in his first term also, he was talking of fire and fury the world has never seen before. And then, of course, he fell in love with Kim Jong-un when he went to Singapore. And in terms of action, there is no difference. In fact, the destruction is absolutely not comparable, is much less as of now compared to carpet bombing that Americans did in Vietnam, for example. So Americans, one after another since Second World War, have again and again destroyed several countries wherever they have gone. Recent example of Afghanistan is very clearly there. So in action, it's not very different from what earlier presidents have done, other than his speaking is very clearly different. Also, the way he speaks about things, and then he, of course, gives ultimatums, then he extends his ultimatums. My assumption at all is that yes, destruction will continue. US forces will continue to hit Iranian sites, and they might gradually shift now to energy, infrastructure, civilian infrastructure, which will directly breach Geneva Convention, which you mentioned, three principles of distinction, proportionality, and military necessity, and that should make him liable to arrest warrants to be issued. But of course, no major powers have faced it so far other than President Putin being issued arrest warrants. South Africa for 3 years has gone to ICC asking for arrest warrants of Benjamin Netanyahu, which is still under investigation. So a lot of words, threats, etc., some destruction on ground. Another extension is what I'm anticipating.
Okay. Ambassador Sikri, I'm sure there's always a sobering impact. There's always a sobering impact within your political system. There is no sobering impact in the American system. There is no challenge to what Donald Trump is doing. The guy controls the nuclear weapon. There is no one to say, well, you don't say that, you don't write that, you don't do that.
Actually, the situation within America is perhaps the most disheartening of all, because Congress has not been able to stop the president in any way. And we've also seen two significant events in the last few days. One is that the army chief was forced to resign. General Randy George, he was forced to resign, to submit his resignation. And the talk is that he was forced to resign because he refused to accept the order to put boots on the ground. He did not want American troops to go into Iran because he knew that the outcome will be disastrous and a lot of people will die, and he did not think that that was really at all worth it. And then he was forced to put in his resignation. So even the other generals, I believe many of them who are left, some of them have resigned, some of them have been forced to resign. Many of them are opposing the question of boots on the ground. So that's what brings the question back to Kharg Island, whether this new bombing of Kharg Island, is it a precursor to boots on the ground, or is it just another threatening act that they are doing? It is true he has not touched the petroleum facilities because America thinks that they want control of Kharg Island, and they will control the facilities which account for 90% of Iranian exports. But of course, Iran can always turn off the tap at the other end from where the petroleum sources are coming. The second thing is that in America, again, there's been a very different appreciation of what happened in Iran over the weekend 2 days ago, when America sent in a large number of aircraft in the name of rescuing the weapons systems officer who had to eject from his plane when it was brought down by Iranian fire. And they were able to rescue the weapons system officer. But the talk is that America sent in this large number of aircraft in an attempt to attack in Isfahan, in the region of Isfahan, the place which is housing the Iranian enriched uranium, about 400 kilograms of it. And the effort was to take away that uranium, that enriched uranium. And it didn't succeed at all. Two C-130 aircraft had to be destroyed on the ground. Many helicopters have been brought down. And this is again being seen as a great frustration by America, that it was a failure. And the American president is certainly very upset with this. So it is in retaliation for both of these situations within America, the chief of army staff having to forced to resign last week, and the attack 2 days ago on the enriched uranium having failed. So President Trump is right now extremely frustrated. That's why he used all that kind of language, and now he's threatening this great attack. Let's see what it will be after 4 hours. But I think the attempt to control Kharg Island, yes, I agree, will be part of it. Nuclear missiles, they are being prepared for. But yes, 1 or 2 nuclear missiles may not help. But the very fact, the thought of using nuclear missiles, I think it should create outrage among the people of America as well. Because even in America, President Trump's popularity now come down to below 30%. It's in the region of 25 or 27%. And And there's even among his own Republican supporters, the support is going down. And even among the Republicans, at least 25% are against a continuation of the Iran war.
I hope there is pressure on pressure on Donald Trump. General Sudhakar ji, one thing is to take the Kharg Island, but will Americans be able to keep the Kharg Island? One, and secondly, Iranians have already issued a statement. An Iranian statement is that the entire GCC circuit will go black. Sudhakar ji.
Yes, Kartik, brilliant questions, military-like questions you have asked.
Thank
I must
you.
compliment you. Firstly, keeping Kharg Island, before they go up to that stage of keeping or occupying Kharg Island, they have to capture it. Now, is Kharg Island a doable objective under the present circumstances? Which is the approach they are going to take? Airborne ops, hot insertion. I have a colleague from the Air Force. He will throw some light on this. So let's say if push comes to a shove, if they have to take it, there is no two ways about it. Then I feel it has to be a multi-dimensional, multi-domain operation to consist of maritime forces moving through Strait of Hormuz. Strait of Hormuz is dominated by hill features onto either side. To the east is the Makran coast type of mountains. They have very deep cuttings and they are ideal for deep ports. They are dominated by low hills up to 2,000 to 3,000 feet. Thereafter, the next level of range around 6,000 feet, and next to next is around 12 to 14,000 feet. It will demand occupation of these hill features. Without that, there cannot be safe passage. There are coastal batteries, there are missile launchers, there are anti-ship missiles, there are mines. So a host of activities has to be undertaken if they have to have some meaningful maritime force building up for a successful link-up, which is a prerequisite. It is mandatory to have certain activities predetermined, pre-positioned, pre-rehearsed. They have to have a link-up. Without link-up, Kharg Island will not have any meaning. Number two, if at all they apply the airborne forces, they have attack helicopters, they have Chinooks, they can apply it. They can have high-altitude dropping of people from by the parachute. It is possible. Kharg Island is of size of 8 kilometers by 5 kilometers. They can do very risky kind of landing. Number three, they can have some missions launched from Iraq and Kuwait side, which they would have actually carried out some reconnaissance. It's around 32 kilometers away from the coastline of Iraq and Kuwait. It is quite doable. They have bases, but after having done that, also they have to have a link-up force. This IRGC would have studied and also taken adequate measure to prevent that from happening. Last but not the least, if at all they go in, let's give the devil its due. They have a successful capture. Keeping it is going to be beyond the capability of any force. You name any superpower, because they should be not only mentally prepared, they should be prepared to take a hammering from IRGC. IRGC has got rockets, it has got artillery, it has got missiles, it has got hypersonic missiles. If Kharg Island is to be captured, it can be captured only under a presumption of having a decimated and devastated or carrying out a catastrophic devastation of the island. Only then it can be captured. And after capture is what is waiting to happen. That is the counter bombardment. That is one part of the answer. Second part, the GCC is going to go dark, absolutely. The data centers which are predominantly concentrated in UAE or Dubai, the cooling, I was sharing with you in one of the discussions through your channel, the cooling segment of data centers is very, very important. They have identified the cooling centers. I think there are a good number of them, exact number I don't remember. The cooling points have been identified. There is pinpointed accuracy, not six figure. There are 10-digit GPS driven Chinese Baidu satellite grids have been given to them. They are targeted, registered. They are only waiting for Donald Trump to trigger the first activity of his announcement, and thereafter you can imagine the IRGC is going to go absolutely full hog to target all this. Entire GCC will go blind.
Okay.
Dark.
Okay. Absolutely. So there can be a lot of theories around it, but Mr. Srivastav, it is one thing to dominate there. It is another thing to control the city. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria has shown that there is a considerable degradation of the civilian infrastructure and life. No one seems to be talking about that. I, as a journalist, have personally traveled to places like Palmyra. I have seen Aleppo. I mean, there is nothing more horrible than what I saw there, sir. Nothing more horrible. I mean, there is no city, there is nothing. There were walls, there were some dogs barking in both the cities, and the entire conversation on war, if you look at it, is around missiles, bombs, but not of the moral deprivation, of people crossing moral lines, not understanding the civilian misery. And Americans, instead of understanding the larger issues which concerns nations like Iran and other countries, have decided to turn into some sort of a video game, social media truth, I'll, end your civilization, you will be back to Stone Age. There is no, in the narrative which, I was going through, there is no sense of moral deprivation that this war stands for.
So you're absolutely right. I mean, for any person who has any kind of shred of morality within himself or as a nation, you will be shocked and you'll be really in awe how these things are being told by the people who hold such powerful positions and hold the mightiest armed forces of the world. You don't do that. But anyway, if this happens, it gets triggered, it will be very difficult to really stop it. It'll be a catastrophe all around, because if Iran goes down, it'll take everybody else go down. And just now, General Sudhakarji was talking about data centers. You'll be shocked to know that data centers cannot be cooled by the seawater. They need desalinated water. So the targets for Iranians, or IRGC if you want to say, will be already, the coordinates are fixed. There are petrochemical complexes and desalination plant. The day it happens, everything will collapse within GCC countries. And those targets are very huge targets. He was just mentioning about the aerial warfare perspective, because desalination plants are usually in an acreage of about 4 to 6 acres, and your petrochemical complexes are as big as 1,000 square kilometers. So it's not something, and they'll have cascading effect. If you pressurize tanks, etc., you hit the pipelines. If one goes berserk, then there'll be a cascading effect. So it's not that they will remain in light and prosperity. And all these targets, whatever economic pieces or economic giants are there from, Fortune 50 country, 50 of American financial power, they have their major things over there. That will also go dark. So it is not something we are talking about that somebody in this interdependent world can go down to Stone Ages all by himself. If one country goes down, others will be hugely impacted. The whole globe will be impacted. And I hope sanity prevails. Somebody tells President Trump, this is not something we do, because they could not, but I'm very wary. The script which was given to President Trump was the incursion into Iran. And what he read was excursion in Iran. And it has different meanings, but nobody has guts to really correct him. So that is the kind of cabinet he has. So if you have this kind of cabinet, this kind of thinking, that everyone just keeps clapping for the king, then how does it go? But yes, I'm pretty sure America is a very mature democracy. There'll be some checks and balances. And before President Trump orders this kind of destruction, which will get converted into mutually assured destruction, whatever weapons are being used, he can use thermobaric weapon if he wishes to, which is barred by the Geneva Convention, but he can use if he wishes to, because he's the mighty one. He doesn't have to answer anyone. But that would be a catastrophe which we at these times cannot really bear.
I think, sir, in last 10 hours, the things have moved up the escalation ladder. A lot of people are saying that this was also in response to Iranians hitting the Al Jubail facility, which I think accounts for 12 to 17% of the Saudi Arabia's GDP. It's a 1,000 square kilometer big territory with 150 industrial hubs. But Professor Swaran Singh, my question is different. Imagine 6 months ago, sir, an ambassador secret to you also, we would discuss the Chinese influence or the Russian influence or the counterbalance. Professor, where is the Chinese counterbalance? Where is the Russian counterbalance? I mean, so there is no counterbalance.
Of course, there are stories, and Ukrainian intelligence is saying that Russia has been helping Iran in terms of targeting regional countries. Civil people in China, individuals are also beginning to talk far more strongly and much more firm in terms of some scholars being online saying that Trump, if he ever thinks of using nuclear weapons, this will not go unanswered, without clarifying what that means in that sense. But when you raised issue of moral degradation, in last 5 years, two fundamental changes are irreversible and are threatening possibly entire human civilization. One is normalization of violence, and second is lumpenization of public discourses. And that is a irreversible trend that we notice now. And some people even, begin to speculate that perhaps we are already in World War III, except that we are taking time to define it such. But the weak point of United States, as it always was, will be when body bags begin to come back home. And I think one after another wars have shown that has invariably pushed one after another president into thinking of closing down military operations, whether they were in Vietnam or whether they were against Taliban in Afghanistan, and landing, troop in amphibious operations in any of these islands. The one definite outcome of that will be body bags of United States soldiers going back home, and I think that is something that made the army chief think that he is not willing to be, allowing such a boots on ground kind of a strategy to take place. And there are videos, I don't know how true or false, that all of us see on social media of complete, clamping down of information, and some army people, army officers are being detained, arrested, and so on. So there is definitely certain amount of discomfiture within armed forces, discomfiture within his own team, etc., etc. But of course, nothing is coming out in open as of now. But this whole simmering undercurrent among allies, among Arab states, among his own team in United States, within Republican Party, and so on, is showcasing this discomfort, except that nobody is standing up to confront President Trump as of now. And that is allowing him to continue to, unleash that destruction. But I will be someone who strongly believes he cannot be thinking of using nuclear option. That there is a very strong nuclear taboo is the strongest taboo that international relations have developed over a period of time. So non-use, non-possession, non-transfer is the nuclear taboo. And I think he is not willing to, he's not going to cross that Rubicon, that red line, I suppose. So yes, threats will be there, some destruction will be there. And I think my expectation is that he will say that he's studying the proposal that has come from Iran, and possibly another extension of another few days, and his fire and fury speeches.
Okay, let me rephrase my question. Ambassador Sikri, the European elite sleepwalked into the World War I till they realized that the 30% of the elite and the youth have died in the Battle of Somme. Before that, no one realized. Is the world sleepwalking into a larger war, madam?
I think we have already sleepwalked into it, and I think we already are in World War III, because even if something terrible doesn't happen tonight, the whole consequences of what has been happening over the last 6 weeks is going to reverberate in terms of the global economy, in terms of recession in the economy. That is what is going to have a terrible repercussion, and the Gulf states cannot escape it from it either. I think Dubai is permanently going to lose its status as a haven of financial stability and prosperity, because look at the destruction that has been wrought over there. So I think that
and madam, no one is talking about pollution, no one is talking about global warming, no one is talking about the sort of deep environmental damage this war is going to do in that region.
Absolutely, it has already done, and to get over it, the ultimate weapon that Iran has in counter to any use of threat of use of nuclear weapons is that they will destroy the undersea cables, the internet connection. between Europe and Asia will be completely destroyed, and all business transactions. That is the big thing that is being talked about now, that Iran in the Straits of Hormuz has control over the Straits of Hormuz, and can destroy those massive amounts of internet cables that are running under the sea, which will completely destroy the communications, business, personal, private, public, everything. So there are weapons that Iran has in its hand to counter, and of course the people's weapon that they are using now, we saw the people on the bridges, is another important weapon. And I think at this time, everybody has to try and get together. Our Prime Minister has been talking about, dialogue and diplomacy and ending the war. He's been speaking to all the leaders of the region. Even in the last week, he's spoken not only to President of Iran, but to President of UAE and others, trying to get people to agree. But the terrible part is that UAE and Saudi Arabia have joined Israel in egging on USA to weaken Iran to the point of no return, and to make sure that they never rise again as a threat to the Gulf countries. So this division within the Gulf countries, at one point Iran and Saudi Arabia had started talking to each other. They were getting to be together and so on. But that's completely gone now, and Iran has just announced that they have stopped all channels of communication with the USA. They've just announced a few seconds ago that they have stopped all channels of communication. They're not going to talk anymore. So it is getting ready for the Armageddon. I don't know what the Armageddon is going to be, but it is going to be very, very serious, judging from what President Trump is saying, and judging from the weapons, the weapons in that Iran holds, particularly the internet weapon that it holds. So it is a very tortuous. I
feel it's less about now weapons and more about the fact that if a society is willing to die, then you are dealing with a very different mindset. You are dealing with a different adversary, because then you are dealing with very different cultural and religious values. I've really run short of time. Thank you, Sudhakar ji. I know you are about to raise your finger. I can only give 30 seconds to you.
No, I just wanted to compliment Ambassador Ma'am and Professor Swaran and my colleague from the Air Force. But quick reflection, 95% of today's connectivity in the world is actually the cable under the sea. Out of 95%, 30% is connecting the Middle East. Iran has already planned. There are special forces trained to go under the sea and also cut it off. One. Number two, you spoke about Chinese counterbalance. Don't be surprised to learn that North Korea has already provided 500 ICBMs which are deployed under the mountains, and these ICBMs have got a range of 15,000 kilometers, can reach up to the Denver and down south towards Mexico side, middle of USA they can cover. ICBMs I have said.
Okay, don't scare me, General. Then you are really talking about the Third World War.
No.
If you're saying that the Denver can be
nuclear option is ruled out, although we should be mindful and be prepared for.
I think, my whole thing is, what is really not acceptable is, I never thought, I would be discussing as a journalist about the nuclear option. It's a taboo thing, To discuss a nuclear option is to normalize it for people. And nuclear option should never be normalized. It's like violence getting normalized for children. That is my biggest concern. Discussing it normalizes it. That is the issue. It's like, violence in OTT. You normalize so much of violence. That is unacceptable. Thank you all of you for joining me.